Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Keep the Line Moving, the podcast designed to talk about leadership, life, and inspiration. I'm your host, Chris Gargano, and for episode 89, we're talking about leadership alignment. What is the story you tell yourself? What is the story you tell others? And is all of that aligned with the company and or organization's goals? Very important. We will dive deep with this topic and so much more with our guest, Andrea Petrone. He's from Milan. He comes to us today from London. He's a human performance coach and advisor to CEOs, C-suite, and their executive teams all over the world. Some of his key areas of focus are building trust, eliminating unhealthy conflict, aligning visions and goals, accountability, motivation, and legacy. He has a podcast. It's called The World Class Leader Show. He has a book coming out soon. In 2018, he will tell us about the time in which he realized that his work was not aligned with his purpose and aspiration to make a bigger impact in the world. A wonderful conversation. You're in the right place. It starts now with Andrea Petrone on Keep the Line Moving. All right, we welcome in Andrea Petrone to the podcast. It's wonderful to see you. I admire the way you come across in the world through platforms like LinkedIn, your podcast, the World Class Leader Show, the way you write and integrate your messaging. It's very clear, easily understood, actionable. So let's start there, Andrea. How did you come into this clarity on the subject of leadership?
Wow, what a start. So first of all, Chris, thank you so much for inviting me on the show. That is a privilege, it's an honor, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. Personally, my experience has been in a corporate world for many years. And as many people in a corporate world, they're used to some sort of buzzword, some sort of jargon, some sort of saying things that they don't actually resonate with other people. And they create more confusion and complexity in something that is already complex by nature, which is business. So I think, Chris, for me, has been being very intentional in the way how I move to change my language to make sure my message is clear. Because at some point I felt into the same trap of many others. Because when you're leading, you start using words just because that's the words that you use in your organization, and people get lost. And when I did actually what I'm doing now, so I jumped on entrepreneurship, I realized probably that the same language was not going to work for me, for my clients. So I decided, let's be very direct, let's be clear, let's make sure that every single word we use matters. And that's my personal approach in leadership, in my work, in my life. And the same thing I try to advise my clients to focus on. So for me, it's been kind of a critical component of my personal growth.
So let's look at this. We evolve as leaders and as human beings as we get older and realize if we're introspective, self-aware, we look back on our journey, we try to connect the dots as to why we arrive at philosophies that you just articulated beautifully. So I will ask you, how did you arrive there? If you go back 10, 15, 20 years and you look at yourself as you evolved as a person, how do you arrive where you are today, the entrepreneur, the executive coach and consultant that you are in your daily business practices?
By the age of 35, everything for me was an incredible, terrific win. So I was winning in all fields in my life and my career. So in very few years, I moved up the ranks. I became managing director at 35 years old, leading an organization. Those moments when everything that you touch seems to turn into gold. And that was really my story on my first part of my career. And then something happened, something kind of unexpected for me at the time was, oh, I actually not so invincible. I can fail too. So I had a couple of bad experiences from a career standpoint that made me realize I was not really as good as I thought. It was not like, I don't need preparation for a meeting. I don't need preparation for getting clients. I don't need whatever, because everything was just working for me. And then I realized that, well, the higher you go, the more complexity you started to work in, or the more challenges you face as a leader, you need to elevate yourself. You need to change your mindset. It's not just about skills, it's really about the mindset. So that moment in time, Chris, for me was pivotal because for the first time, I realized with a very high sense of humility, which is something I didn't have at the time, I need to get someone help me. And for me, it was a sort of personal. I struggled because it was a kind of a personal failure. So no, I can't. I'm a winner. Oh, what the hell? Me working with someone, and I did it. I did. I worked with the executive coach at the time. It was incredible transformational experience where I started to work on myself and I started to appreciate, all the things that were not working for me. And I realized, okay, I'm human. I'm human, and with all the flaws that humans have, at the time, the second part of a career started. And interesting enough, which is not a surprise now, in the second part of my career was actually even better than the first part. And that was just a recognition of how changing myself, my style, my attitude, my mindset has completely transformed my life. And at some point, after many, many years of success, I said, "That's the time to give something back to people." And I think I have the privilege to have bad experiences, also bad bosses, etc. But also, I live in 7 different countries, different roles, different stories, different companies. I think it's time for me to give something back. Most of the people they do just a little bit later in life. I started, when I was 47, so quite young, if you like, from an executive coaching standpoint. And then it's been just a success. So after that,
So you said and you write about your epiphany that you had in 2018, right when you started to realize this. And then you transitioned in your career, helping others in the executive coaching space. So, Andrea, this is very compelling. When you were having all that success and things were going right for you, as you said, you worked in 7 countries, 3 continents, nothing but success. And then you started to realize, you needed some humility and some checkpoints, right? Did the executive coach help at that time realize that? You didn't use this word, but it was a selfish mindset, right? Was it? Or you thought you were bulletproof per se? How did it all happen? How did you arrive at that epiphany in 2018?
yeah. So a couple of points. So one is, I did not. I was not really selfish per se. I think I was just driven by success, by the idea of, look, by the way, there is nothing wrong with that, right? 'Cause especially, I'm coming from a very humble family, to some extent, people they used to accept status quo, accept, the normal or accept the ordinary and play a little bit safe. For me, as for many people, ambition was just a part of demonstrating to myself, to other people, my community, small, I'm coming from a small town north of Italy, was I can do something better. I can do something different. I can do something extraordinary. So it was not really selfish per se in a negative with a negative connotation. It was more about proving that I can create something extraordinary that maybe no one else has created around me. That was really the intention. Um, so I think it was really driven by successes in that way. On the second point to your first question is yes, executive coaching has been pivotal for developing humility back because I grew up professionally in a very conservative industry, oil energy, where if you show any sort of, or let's be specific, admitting mistakes or admitting that you are wrong or be considered like vulnerable 20 years ago was, look, if you show any some sort of weakness, you are considered weak. And so it wasn't really as many. I probably wear a mask, and I thought that was probably the right way to do so. Coaching really helped me to be myself, to be fair. So the humility was already there, but was just not able to demonstrate it, to show to people. So I reconnected with the sense of humanity, being humble, humility for myself. And you guess what? As long as, sorry, the more you progress in your career, the more you become aware of it, the more actually you become humble when things happen and you start to accept things as they are. So short answer, yes, coaching has been pivotal for making that transition.
So, Andrea, as you have said, you've worked in 7 countries on 3 continents. So you've seen everything. When you look at the clients that you work with across the globe, what are they facing? I know that's a gigantic question, but if you were to crystallize it into maybe one or two key points, what would you say they are facing?
Yeah, so many different answers, but I would say let's focus on two or three things that to me they're probably more interesting right now. So first of all is something that I think we are all aware of it, but then the implication of it in the organization is a completely different game. So is the sense of uncertainty and ambiguity that all the leaders are facing right now. So the post-COVID has been interesting how has changed completely the way how people working together, but also has increased the number of complexity back to where we started: complexity, uncertainty, ambiguity. So dealing with it today and tomorrow at the same time, dealing with a very limited pool of resources, dealing with the number of changes that you have to create and make, not anymore every 5 or 10 years, but now every actually couple of years, maybe 1 year, or even actually 6 months. So look, it's feeling like many leaders, they are living into this kind of hamster wheel where they keep changing or adapting to a new situation, new condition they are showing up in front of them. So that is a different leadership. That's not the leadership that we're used to talk to or deal with. It's a different set of skills they are required. They require more agility, more adaptability, more ability to understand that, back to humility, you need to pivot, and you need to maybe admit to the market, not only to your people, hey, look, we tried, it's not working, so we have to make changes. So that's sort of pressure of getting things right. It wasn't there a decade ago, even maybe 5 years ago to some extent. So I'm writing a book right now in terms of, for CEOs. How can CEOs can thrive in a world that is changing like that? And to me, back to my personal reflection and story, humility has an important and very significant presence into that, because humility is the leverage to me. The humanity, the sense of humanity, is the leverage to deal with some such incredible level of uncertainty and ambiguity. So that, I think, is number one. And the second, which is connected to that, is the idea of, I would like to go back to the idea of today and tomorrow. Meaning, I have many clients that are dealing with the situation of they want to create, at least some of them, at least the one that are working with me, a very aspirational future, something that has to be bold, something that could be, that has a purpose, there's a meaning, there's an idea of impacting the future of society. That's what I stand for as a person. But at the same time, they need to deal with all the consequence of what I just said is, changing things very quickly, or adapting to no availability of resources, or lack of talents, or financial constraints. All of that, they unfortunately they tend them to really focus on what is happening today. So a little bit more into the crisis more, or into the operational way of leading a company, which is needed. So I'm not suggesting at all, forget about it today, just focus on the, future and aspiration. That doesn't work. You have to you have to focus on both. Here's the interesting thing, Chris, in my personal reflection is some leaders are not able to do, and most likely most of the leaders out there, they're not able to cope with both. Either they focus on the today or they focus on tomorrow. But focus on today is in a comfort zone, so they can do it. When it comes to focus on tomorrow, the only way for some of them to focus on tomorrow is stabilizing the today, so they can really have the bandwidth, the mental state to focus on creating something for the future. The third one, going back to the point, is the sense of humanity. Humanity is an enabler, is a leverage to make sure what I describe, is possible. Leading with uncertainty, leading with ambiguity, creating a future I deal with today, but without sense of humanity today, we're gonna lose people. The new generation of leaders, they get it, but the old generation is a question mark. So I'm stop here, Chris, because I think it's already a lot.
No, that was a great answer. So when you walk into a consulting job, you're coaching somebody, a CEO, a group of people, you have to evaluate them. You're sitting across from them and you're asking your questions. It's starting to click into your brain, into your evaluation process. The person across from me right now does not have humanity, is not showing humility. What do? Can you change that in somebody? How do you go about expressing to someone that you need to be more humble? You need to show more care for humanity and those that you are leading.
Yeah, that's really $1 million question. And I would say the reason why I'm writing a book right now is exactly to answer your question, Chris, which is a really timely question because based on my personal experience, you can't really change people. That's not our job. But our job is maybe just creating a little bit of opening in people where they can actually start to see something different for themselves so they can relate with themselves or with the role in a different way because they see there is a light and that light might drive to different performance. So in my book, what I'm trying to do is actually linking the humanity piece and many other areas which require change in leadership approach to results, to performance. Now, for many CEOs, if you're not able to connect the dots, they will say, yes, that's great, that's nice. I would like to be much more humble. I would like to be much more human, but I'm sexual. Things working for me. Why should I change? What I will demonstrate in my book is actually by embracing these different mindset attitudes, you can drive better performance in organization. But you have to create that sort of a bridge between an attitude and mindset to the results and performance. Because if you don't, for many people, it will be very difficult to change, which is not a surprise why, first time CEOs, normally a general manager, managing director, when I work with them, it's way easier because, there is a ground where you can start creating something because they are in the first. And by the way, that's not only for CEOs, also for the first time, C-suite leader or whatever. When you are for the first time into a new role, you are much more adaptable, right? You are much more open to consider, embrace different styles because you don't even know, what's going to work in the future in a new role. But for those people that have been there for many years, look, you can't really, walk the door and say, hey, you need to change your style because it's not working unless you prove there is an uplift, an upside in performance, or there is a burning platform, which might be the other way. So if there is a burning platform, maybe they can start considering, well, maybe with another approach, I can get this solved earlier, sooner. But depending on what is the burning platform, if it's just financial, they're gonna push harder rather than changing. So
Okay, so let's look at the other side of the coin on that. When you do engage with the CEO who gets it, they're humble, they have a wonderful respect for humanity, they care for their people, just want to get better. What are those conversations like that you have with clients that make up that profile?
so by the way, just to give some sense of hope, in the business world, um, all clients I'm working with at the moment, they're all CEOs, they are incredible human. And they are CEOs of medium and even large organizations. So it's absolutely possible. I think for me is when people they're ready, what as I call them, people leaders, people CEOs, every conversation it's easier. You don't need to explain why they need to be vulnerable and admitting their mistakes in front of the executives, or they don't need to be on a listener mode when they're with others because they just do it. They just do it because they put people at the top or at the center of the way how they lead. It's a really an easy conversations. It's a little bit more complicated when people they don't really feel in the way. People I work with, they tend to be people like me. They tend to appreciate, the values and the attitudes and the mindset I normally have for myself. But there is one specific condition they need to change. They need to start making an intentional decision of not wearing a mask at work. And until they do that, it will be absolutely impossible. So in coaching conversation one to one, normally that's what we trying to discover. So and again, I always looking from a coaching standpoint, always looking for openings. If there is an opening, if there is a curiosity, if there is an interest to hear something different, people, because people are incredible smart and CEOs are incredible smart, they get it. They see that there is an opening there. Then the application of it in the real life when things get difficult, it's a different story.
So earlier in our conversation, we talked about language, but it's more than just language. It's body language. It's that intrapersonal. How are we seen? How we engage with people? Are we genuine? Are we warm? What is our aura? How important is that? And do you find that underrated in a way of evaluating the CEOs that you work with? And in other words, how do you see that?
So there is one element I think is, to me, is probably the most important element, that body language is a reflection of the things I'm going to say, is the emotional maturity. So something that great leaders do is they're able to control really their emotions in incredible way. Now, what I think we need to distinguish is controlling emotion doesn't mean doesn't mean not showing emotion. Controlling emotion is just that they're ready to deal with the challenging conversations with challenging people without bringing their own emotions in the foreground and then affecting the quality or the level of conversation or the outcome they want to produce with others. And emotional, and for me, has been something that I've been always very mindful about. My ability, so many people around me, they say I have incredible high level of emotional control. So even when things get difficult, normally, you see me operating in the same way. Look, there might be a fire inside of me, but I'm trying to be conscious about what is the reaction I'm going to bring to people, I'm going to create in people. So I'm mindful how I want to leave people by or with after they have an interaction with me. And that actually brings a little bit more confidence in people, brings this sense of stability, because, okay, so you are a leader and you are dealing with emotion I'm not able to deal with right now. So it sounds like I'm in a good hands. I'm protected. I feel valued. You are listening to me, but also you know how to deal with situation. It's very difficult. It requires mastery, but that's, to me, is the key, is the ability to control emotions.
Very valuable right there. All right, before we get to the all-star moments, Andrea, I'm going to ask you, what advice would you give a new CEO? Somebody's listening to this right now. They want to know, what is the first thing I should do upon walking in that office building to address the folks that I'm now going to lead for the first time?
Yeah, so to me, is number one is be extremely clear, back to clarity, be extremely clear how you're going to actually drive success here. So what is the impact that you want to create for yourself? And that is the number one question, because whatever you're gonna do, whatever behavior is gonna you're gonna show in the organization, that must be a reflection of what the future you want to create, what the impact you want to create for yourself. And that's the number one thing. The second part is back to the conversation we had. Approach this as incredible discovery project for yourself. Be always in a discovery mood, meaning approach every person, approach every conversation, approach every project with a curiosity, with a sense of discovery. You're going to discover something different that you didn't know before. That is, by the way, is incredible powerful, not only for the results of that, but also because you're going to create a completely different state of mind where you're going to approach things in a different way. You're going to start listening more. You're going to really be you're going to actually listen what people don't say, and you're going to really understand what people want and what their needs, customers included. So I think, impact, on clarity of impact, especially in the short term, creating this sense of self-discovery for yourself, living discovery, and meaning maybe, meet people, etc. And the third, which is connected to the second, is I'm a huge fan of this idea of frontline leader, and I'm a really huge fan of it. So if you are a first time CEOs, become a frontline leader, meaning once you have, turn your mindset into discovery mindset, spend most of your time talking to people, because leadership is always a conversation. There is no other way to impact leadership than a conversation. So the more conversation you have, and conversation could be just listening, by the way, but the more conversation you have, the more ability you have to drive leadership, because leadership is that. There's no any other form, shape or form that can, you know, be characterized as leadership than conversation. So to me, these are the three things. And if you approach in that way, future driven, impact, focus, discovery, and frontline leadership, you are gonna really start, with the right foot.
That is great. I appreciate that. All right, Andrea, are you ready for the all-star moments? Here we go. First thought, best thought. Here we go. How do you deal with adversity?
Well, with this discovery mindset, I will start with the discovery, because once you are in discovery, you can deal with adversity way easier because you can find choices in front of you.
What gives you fuel?
For me, it's all about three things: is a sense of purpose, second is a drive, and third is a sense of mastery. Learning is something that fuels energy.
Never give up. What does that mean to you?
For me is never stop, chasing your aspirations. So create something aspiration for yourself and never stop, and make sure what you do is always aligned with the aspiration that you have for yourself.
What is the value of collaboration?
Right. So value collaboration to me is all about what is not happening in the organization at the moment. So it's create a connected workforce instead of keeping organization working in silos, which the look, we keep talking about it, but the more I see organization out there, the more they're still working in silos. So create a connected workforce, because the results are gonna come only in that way.
Hiring people, you've done a lot of that. What do you look for in an ideal candidate?
Attitude first, mindset, attitude, that's what I'm looking for. Skills can be learned. I'm less interesting or less curious about skills unless it's a very specific role. Otherwise, when you hire for the right mindset, attitude, things will happen, because mindset drives behavior. So don't hire for behaviors, actually hire for mindset, because the right mindset will drive the right behaviors.
What is the difference between a manager and a leader?
So managers, they don't need to alter the status quo, Chris. They're just leading what is already there. They're managing the existing, managing the ordinary. The right readers, what they do, they alter the status quo because they produce something extraordinary.
Lastly, describe yourself as a leader in one sentence.
I'm a leader that really values humanity, because humanity is the way to produce the best out of the business and get the most out of people. So for me, it's all about leading humanity and creating something extraordinary. So leave always a legacy. And that's my focus.
Wonderful. Andrea, outstanding. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for this interview. Amazing questions, and love the vibe energy that you created today.
And we thank Andrea very much for being on the show. I have 3 takeaways from this conversation, and let's parallel the 3 main topics that Andrea works with the CEOs on a daily basis. Number 1, dealing with uncertainty, with technology and the way that the world is rapidly changing. Rather than focusing 3 years, 5 years, it's more like 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year, right? We have to be nimble and adjusting constantly to deal with the changing world that we face today. Number 2, wanting to have a bold impact. You heard Andrea. He said, making sure you have a huge impact as a leader, but you cannot neglect the day to day and taking care of your people and asking good questions and making sure that you're focused on both long range impact, but taking care of the day to day and the nuances of being a leader. And number 3, never forgetting humanity, right? Being a person who asks questions and cares about the people that you lead. Otherwise, you will lose them, said Andrea. What a fascinating conversation. And I thank him very much for being on the show. Hope you enjoyed it very much. Thank you, everybody, for being part of the podcast each and every week. Recommend this podcast, please, to a family member, a friend, a colleague, a former boss. Let me know what they say. Fill in some comments, write a review, rate the podcast. We appreciate it. Have a great week, everybody. Take care. Every week, you hear guests on this podcast talk about some of their biggest leadership challenges. As a leader, you want to make an impact on those you lead and reach your organization's goals, while also optimizing your time management. Wherever you are in your leadership journey, we could all use some help. This is what we focus on with our group and individual coaching services. To book a call or get more information, email me directly at chrisg@garganoleadership.com or visit our website at garganoleadership.com. For our podcast and video producer, Jack Radutsky, and our marketing coordinator, Savin Narwal, have a great week, everybody.